Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election, and this will be the first part of a couple videos I'll be releasing over the course of the next few days, detailing minor candidates for the Republican Party in matchups versus Joe Biden. So, I'll be doing Mike Pence. I've already talked about Ramaswamy. We talked a lot about DeSantis and Trump, so I'll be doing Pence, then Doug Burgum, and then Chris Christie. So, obviously, Nikki Haley's the one I left out. I already did a video on her. It's from a few months ago. I'll definitely give that an update, but I will. I do want to first get through all the decently well-known candidates before we cycle back. But today's video is going to be Pence versus Biden. So this obviously needs no further explanation. We're going to get right into it here by filling out the states that I think would be safe for Joe Biden. So we have the West Coast, Colorado. I think he'd do well in New England. Kind of your typical Democratic safe states here, and as well as Illinois, which is in the Midwest, I forgot about. And then for Pence, I think he'd have a pretty solid hold on most of the Republican states. Obviously, I think he'd do a bit better in Nebraska's first than Trump would, but it wouldn't be meaningful as that seat will vote for Republicans no matter what. And then he's going to get the same amount of support in these states. I think South Carolina is basically safe, but I think he wins by a bit less than Trump, so we'll distinguish that there just because of rural turnout, because South Carolina is a very Trumpy state. The electorate there on the Republican side is very pro-Trump, and, there are some suburban areas where I think Pence would do a little better, but not by much. And so these are the safe electoral votes for Mike Pence. Now, for Joe Biden, we're just going to fill out the other likely states that I don't really think are worth talking about too much. These are New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, and Maine, as well as New Hampshire, which I always forget to characterize for some reason. And then for Mike Pence, we'll do the same. We're going to give him Alaska, Kansas. Oh, and I always forget one for Joe Biden. It's always Nebraska second. Alaska, Kansas, Iowa, Ohio, and Florida. So these are our remaining competitive states. Again, I went through that really quickly because I didn't really want to spend too much time talking about any of these states. I think the only one that's kind of interesting on either side would probably be Florida, which maybe if you make the argument that Pence would do poorly among Republicans with turnout, which is definitely possible. Again, for this scenario to even happen, Pence would have to beat Trump in a really competitive primary, and I think that would depress Trump turnout. And I really don't think Trump would endorse Pence if he were to get the nomination. If he were to lose, maybe he would, but I really doubt it. I don't think Trump would go quietly. I think he might encourage people to not vote or maybe write himself in. I don't know. Either way, though, I think for Pence, in any realistic scenario, he'd probably win Florida by a good amount, but it wouldn't. I think he'd be pretty bad in the rural areas, especially the Panhandle, which is obviously a very Trumpy part of the state. So that being said, I do want to talk about these lean states. We're going to go to Joe Biden first. We're going to give him Michigan and Pennsylvania here. And so these states, I'm going to say, are relatively close. Pennsylvania especially, because I do think Pence has a sort of he was a former Midwestern governor. I think he can maybe appeal a little better than Trump to Midwestern suburbs, especially because he is a bit less well-known to be an election denier. Obviously, he at January 6th did not do what Trump wanted him to do, and so I think that gives him some goodwill with moderate voters. Nevertheless, though, he was still part of the Trump administration. I think Biden's going to hammer him for that. I think Biden's going to say, look, you enabled Trump. You were still on the Trump train until it kind of crashed, and that's going to really hurt Mike Pence. So I would say, and also you combine that with the thing I already mentioned, which is depressed GOP turnout potentially. I think he loses both these states by probably 3 to 5 points. Michigan probably by 5, Pennsylvania by maybe 3 or 4. And then I would say he also loses the state of Wisconsin. It's going to be closer. It's probably about a 2-point margin. But realistically, Wisconsin, I think, is the state in the Rust Belt where Trump does the best compared to other Republicans. Those rural areas in that drift list border region with Minnesota and Iowa, they're really, really unique in that Donald Trump has just an incredible amount of strength there. And obviously, they would come out for Republicans. They're right-trending areas. It's not like Republicans are going to lose them once Trump gets off the ballot. In 2022, Ron Johnson did well there. So those are certainly things to consider. But here's the important, and this is the overarching theme where in places Pence is going to underperform. In a contentious primary, if Donald Trump even if he can even convince 10% of voters to just sit out, Pence would crash in rural areas, he'd crash in working class areas, and he'd crash in areas where Trump has done better than other Republicans historically. So Wisconsin, to me, there's a lot of examples of that across the state. Maybe Pence does a bit better in the WOW counties. I don't think he does well enough to win the state. I think he loses it by 2 to 2.5 points. And so That gets Joe Biden to 270, so he's won the election. Now, Mike Pence, he has a couple lean states. I think he wins Texas and Maine's second by lean margins. Texas, to start out there, Texas, I think Pence wins by a bit more than Trump. I think he does about as well with Hispanic voters as Trump does, maybe a little worse, and I think he does very well in the suburbs compared to Trump. Again, Texas is, and this is the thing, we talk about suburbs in the country being moderate. They're always very moderate, but they will kind of tilt one way. I would say the suburbs in Philadelphia are moderate liberal. So the suburbs in Texas are moderate conservative, and I think Pence has a much better appeal to a college-educated voter outside of, say, Dallas than outside of Philadelphia. As just an example, the same would go for maybe Detroit or Washington, D.C. or Denver. And so Dallas and other metro areas in Texas are more culturally conservative, and I think that is a good fit for Pence. I also think that he would do well among rural voters in Texas because, again, Donald Trump really maxed out Republican turnout potential in rural Texas, and I think that's a good thing for him. But Republicans have always been strong here. They haven't always been strong in western Wisconsin. They haven't always been strong in, the Michigan Upper Peninsula. So Mike Pence, I think, has a bit less room to fall in the Texas Panhandle, in areas like that, because Republicans have always been doing well there. So we're going to give him Texas probably by a bit more than Trump. I think Trump wins it by 3, Pence wins it by 4 or 5. Maine second district, this is another example of an area where Trump did really well, kind of the opposite of Texas. Obviously, Al Gore won Maine second, John Kerry won it, Obama won it twice, and Democrats still hold the seat in Congress. But Donald Trump is really popular here. He has done very well here both in 2016 and 2020. The seat got a point bluer because of redistricting. Won't matter. I think Mike Pence will probably win it, although it will be by less. It's a Trump plus 7 seat as it is now. I think he wins it by 5. Trump probably wins it by 8 or 9 if he were to run, if he were to be the GOP nominee in 2024. So there are 4 remaining states. They're all in the Sun Belt, and I think Pence, the easiest one is North Carolina, which I think Pence gets probably by maybe 2%. It's on the higher end of tilt, but I want to put it there because I want to differentiate it from Maine 2 and Texas. And so North Carolina is a problem for Pence because he would, I think, really have a hard. This goes for the South in general. We'll talk about it for Georgia too, but we're not there yet. But South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, those states are not competitive, so it doesn't matter. But I think Pence would see a pretty considerable drop-off in votes cast from rural counties just because of turnout. If he were to be the GOP nominee, due to the notion that he's a traitor to Trump, maybe he didn't do his job on January 6th in the eyes of these voters, which obviously is not true. Mike Pence could not have overturned the 2024 or the 2020 election results. But regardless, I would say that turnout in these southern states, I think, would really be a bad thing for Republicans. And even though Pence would do better with educated voters in the suburbs, would it be enough to win North Carolina by 3% or 4%? Probably not. Now, I think he wins it. I think he would do well enough because it is a red-leaning state to hold on. I don't think by enough, though. So that is our, kind of North Carolina thing. Now, to go over to Georgia and Nevada, I think these are both states that will be very close. I think Biden wins Georgia, and I think he wins Nevada, but I think he loses Arizona. And this is, this could be a reach. I think Biden, everyone thinks he's going to win Arizona in 2024, no matter who he runs against. I get that. Here's the problem, though. And just to start with Arizona, again, this is easily the closest one, and obviously I will make bold calls to make these videos more interesting. So obviously, Mike Pence may not win Arizona against Joe Biden. It's a 50-50. We're going to give it to him because I think it's the more controversial, more entertaining take. So let's talk about Arizona first, then we'll go to Nevada and Georgia. So Arizona, to me, is pretty clearly an elastic state. We saw Democrats won the Senate race by 5 after winning the presidency by 0.3, and then they won the governorship by 0.6, but they lost the treasury race by 10. So there are a lot of really interesting results that come out of Arizona almost every year. There's a lot of ticket splitting. There's a lot of people who vote Republican in the House or for governor, but then will vote Democrat at the presidential or Senate level. And I think that those things come from different areas, right? So in 2018, the Democrats did really well in the Senate race, and they, lost the governorship by like 14. In 2020, Democrats did really well in the Senate race again, but they only won the presidency by 0.3. And then in 2022, they do well in the Senate race again, and they do better than expected in the governor's race, and they overall overperform in every aspect of Arizona. So it really varies by year which race Democrats do well in, but I think 2024 could be a year where Mike Pence does poorly. So Arizona, a lot of the pro-Biden arguments I'm making in this video that have hurt Mike Pence are kind of, turnout arguments that Republican turnout might be depressed if Pence beats Trump in the primary. And I get that. And I think that would, to an extent apply to Arizona. But Arizona is not a Trumpian state the way, much of the Deep South is, or the way rural Wisconsin is. And so that benefits Pence because it gives him less room to fall. And when you look at the turnout patterns from Arizona in 2022, Democrats won big despite getting outvoted. And again, rural Arizona just isn't big enough to make up for that much of the electorate. And so even if Pence loses like 10% support in rural Arizona, he can make that up by winning 5% back in the suburbs, which I think he can do. So because Arizona is not a super rural state, because it's mostly just concentrated in Maricopa County, which is left trending, is getting better for Democrats every year. But if Pence could outperform Trump there by enough, I think he could win the state. So is it a hot take? Yes. Obviously, you disagree. I totally respect that, and I get where you're coming from. But I thought, why not give Arizona to Pence? Now, Biden still wins the election, and he wins Nevada and Georgia. I think Nevada is really weird. It's like probably the weirdest state politically. I will never get over how strange just anything about Nevada is. It's one of my favorite states personally. I've been to it a couple of times. It's always fascinated me. But to get more on topic here, the reason I think Biden wins Nevada against Pence, but maybe not Trump, is because the rural areas of Nevada are so stereotypically rural, and because they're so Trumpian, that they could easily cost Republicans a race here, right? So in 2022, Adam Laxalt lost the Senate race by like 8,000 votes, which is really close. It's under 1%. But had he gotten Trump 2020 turnout in the rural areas, he would have won by a decent amount. And so rural Nevada isn't big, but it turns out decently for Trump, and it hasn't done that in the past. Again, you go to even 2012, where Mitt Romney was supposedly a good candidate for Southern Nevada. He did terrible in the rural areas, and he lost the state by like 6 or 7 points against Obama, who had not even maxed out the suburbs. And Nevada's a big, there's a lot of suburbs, a lot of urban areas, but the rural areas carry a lot more sway than you'd think. And so it's kind of like a reverse Arizona situation where Pence does well in the suburbs, but the rural areas are just so bad in turnout because they're so Trumpian and so attached to the identity that they cost Pence the state. Now, hot take, I know. I think it's kind of weird to see Nevada voting blue, but Arizona voting red. But I think this could be a result that produces it. Then to go back to Georgia, I think Biden probably wins Georgia by like half a point against Pence. He does better. Pence just does better in rural areas like Gwinnett County, Forsyth County, Henry County, Cobb County, Newton. I'm just naming counties in suburban Atlanta, but I think it's pretty obvious he did better with college-educated voters than Trump would. But rural North Georgia, terrible turnout for Pence, and then the rural white southern portion of the state, kind of down here, but situated between Savannah over here and I believe Augusta's over here and Columbus is over here, kind of between that triangle of cities. There's a bunch of rural white counties, and I think Pence would do worse there, so he loses the state. But very rough guess. I hope you enjoyed this video because I didn't script it. I just kind of gave my takes as I went. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Let me know what you want to see next. If there are any presidential matches you want me to cover after I do this one, and then Burgum and Christie. So let me know what you want to see, and I'll see you all in the next one.